Imagine waking up one morning to find your name being whispered in rooms you've never entered, your integrity questioned by people you thought were on your side. No confrontation, no warning, just quiet suspicion, hanging in the air like smoke. After a fire you didn't start. Your first instinct is to fight it, to shout the truth so loud it drowns out the lies. But here's the twist. The more you explain, the guiltier you look. The more you defend yourself, the more they lean in not to understand, but to watch you squirm. You're not in a conversation anymore. You're on trial, and your innocence. It's being turned into entertainment. This isn't just about reputation. This is about identity. It's about what happens when the truth isn't enough. When the people around you are quicker to believe noise than to trust your silence. And in that moment, you face a question that cuts deeper than any lie. Do I scream for justice? Or do I stay silent and let the storm reveal itself? Ethan knows that storm well. He was a respected structural engineer in Seattle. Calm, collected. Brilliant, someone who built not just bridges, but trust. That was, until the whispers started. A delay in the timeline. A faulty permit. Suddenly, without evidence or warning, eyes turned toward him. Maybe he messed up the math. Someone said, "He's too young for a project this big." Another added, It didn't matter that Ethan had spreadsheets, calculations, proof in black and white. The damage wasn't logical. It was emotional. And people don't crave facts, they crave drama. Ethan stood at the edge of that fire and made a choice few have the strength to make. He didn't respond. No emails, no confrontations, no office speeches. He kept working, kept showing up, kept calm, and quietly, he started documenting just for himself. Not to defend, to anchor, to stay rooted in his reality when everyone else was chasing illusions. 3 weeks later, a third-party audit cleared everything. The delay was caused by an outdated permit that had been buried in city files. Ethan's name cleared his reputation, untouched. But more than that, his silence became his signature. It said more about him than any defense ever could. Because here's what the Stoics understood. Truth doesn't shout, it waits. Lies burn fast but fade. Truth moves slowly, but it leaves no ashes behind. And when you refuse to dance with deception, you force the world to pause, to notice, to remember who you are without needing to hear it from your own mouth. So if you've ever been lied about, misunderstood, or thrown under the bus for someone else's comfort, remember this: you don't owe anyone your panic. You don't need to prove what time will eventually expose. You don't have to trade your peace for their entertainment. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is nothing at all. And if this story stirs something in you, if you've ever felt the weight of a false narrative and had no one to defend you, then stick with me. Because this video is for you. For the ones who choose dignity over drama. For the ones who understand that silence isn't surrendered strategy. If that resonates with you, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Support this channel so we can keep bringing you stories and insights that speak where the noise tries to drown everything out. Your support means more than you know. And now let me ask you this. Have you ever stayed silent even when you knew the truth? Comment your answer below. A. Yes, I knew it wasn't worth the energy. B. No, I couldn't hold it in. I had to speak. Let's see how many of us have faced the fire and chosen stillness. Drop your answer in the comments. Betrayal doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk through the front door screaming, "I'm here to ruin everything." No, it comes quietly, with a smile, a familiar voice, a soft touch you once trusted. That's what makes it hurt. Not the act itself, but the source. Madison had known Kira since freshman year of college. From sleepless nights building their fashion portfolios to crying over heartbreaks, they had been inseparable. Their bond was more than friendship, it was sisterhood, or so Madison thought. So when she landed her dream opportunity with a boutique in Soho, The first person she called was Kira. They celebrated over champagne and laughter, making plans for what came next. But what Madison didn't see, what she couldn't have guessed, was that jealousy had been quietly simmering beneath Kira's smiles for years. 2 months later, Madison's designs showed up on another platform, slightly altered, but unmistakably hers, and the name attached to the release, Kira's. Not only that, but the boutique began to pull back, citing similarities between collections and expressing concern about originality. The silence from Kira during that time was deafening. Madison could have exploded, every thread of her being screamed for confrontation. She could have gone online, exposed the truth, let anger do what betrayal had ignited. But somewhere in that emotional chaos, something shifted. She saw through it, not just the act, but the game behind it. Kira wasn't looking for success. She was looking for validation, and she wanted Madison's reaction to prove she still mattered. So Madison gave her the one thing she feared most, nothing. No angry texts, no public callouts, no back and forth, just absence. Not the kind that punishes, but the kind that speaks. That tells a person they no longer have access to your energy, your loyalty, your trust. In that silence, Madison found something she hadn't felt in weeks: clarity. She returned to her work, rebuilt her focus, and channeled the pain into a new collection. The boutique, noticing her professionalism and originality, reached back out. The truth about Kira's past collaborations began surfacing from others too. She wasn't the only one, but Madison, she never had to say a word. There's a misconception that silence is weakness, that it's passive, even cowardly. But in Stoic philosophy, silence is discipline. It's knowing the difference between what you can control and what you must release. Betrayal wants you to react. It wants a scene, a breakdown, a final monologue that validates the betrayer's importance. But walking away whole, quietly, is the most radical thing you can do. When someone betrays you, they've already written a story in their head where they're the hero. You explaining yourself only makes you part of their script. But when you exit that story, when you leave the scene without delivering the final line, they're left talking to an empty room. And that silence, it lingers. It forces reflection. It forces accountability. Madison never got an apology. She never needed one. What she got was her peace back. Her silence wasn't revenge, it was realignment. A declaration that she would rather rebuild alone than stay connected to someone who broke her out of convenience. It's a lesson most of us learn the hard way. Not everyone who walks with you is meant to stay. Some people are seasonal. Some people are survival lessons wrapped in smiles. And the longer you hold on to who they were, the harder it is to accept who they are now. So if you're navigating betrayal, remember this: you don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to burn bridges. You just need to stop crossing them. Walk away not to punish them, but to protect yourself. And do it with the kind of silence that doesn't demand closure, because it already contains the truth. The most dignified exit is the one made in stillness. Not because you're weak, but because you've grown strong enough to know that some battles aren't worth your breath. Let silence be your statement. Let presence be your power. And let your healing speak louder than any confrontation ever could. There's a moment when someone throws words at you like daggers, not because they're seeking truth, but because they're seeking control. It's subtle at first, a sarcastic comment, a side glance wrapped in mockery, a joke that's only funny to the ones who enjoy watching you squirm. And in that moment, you're presented with a choice. Will you let your emotions dictate your response, or will you stand in the storm without letting it soak you? Lucas never asked for attention. He was the type to let his work speak, to lead by example, not by volume. At just 28, he had climbed the ranks of a major marketing agency in Chicago through grit, insight, and an unshakable calm. But success doesn't always inspire admiration. Sometimes, it invites envy. after his recent promotion. During what was supposed to be a celebratory team dinner, the air shifted as the glasses clinked and small talk floated through the room. One of his peers, an older colleague who had been passed over for the role, raised his voice just enough for everyone to hear. "Looks like they're giving away leadership titles like raffle prizes now." The room went still for a split second. Then the nervous chuckles came. Eyes turned to Lucas, expecting retaliation, a rebuttal, a clever comeback. But he gave them none of that. He simply looked at the man, nodded slightly, and turned his attention back to his meal. No tension, no sarcasm, no reaction. In that moment, Lucas wasn't silent because he didn't know what to say. He was silent because he didn't need to say anything. His success was not up for negotiation, and his self-respect didn't require defense. Because what? Lucas understood Dan what many overlooks, that insults are not about clarity, they're about chaos. They're attempts to pull you out of alignment. They're emotional bait, crafted not to inform, but to unbalance. And every time you take that bait, every time you react to prove a point, you give away something you should guard with everything: your peace. There's a dangerous illusion in thinking that the best response is the loudest one, that if we clap back harder, sharper, faster, we win. But the truth is, the second you enter that ring, you've already lowered yourself into a fight that's beneath you. A battle where the only prize is temporary validation. Lucas chose a different path, a path of inner mastery. Not because he lacked words, but because he understood their value. He didn't meet insult with insult. He met it with dignity, and in that choice, he flipped the power dynamic. The man who mocked him, he looked petty, insecure, and most of all irrelevant. That's the paradox of silence. It doesn't feel powerful in the moment. It feels small, restrained, even painful. But over time, it echoes louder than any retaliation ever could. It lingers. It leaves the attacker with nothing to hold on to, nothing to twist, nothing to escalate. Just their own words, hanging there unanswered. Stoicism teaches us that self-control is the foundation of freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And there is nothing more liberating than realizing you don't have to match someone's energy to neutralize it. You can rise above it, and in doing so, you remind the world and yourself who you really are. Lucas didn't need to defend his title. He had earned it. He didn't need to prove his worth. He lived it every day in how he led, how he handled pressure, how he remained unshaken. That's what his silence said. It wasn't absence. It was presence. The kind of presence that makes noise irrelevant. If you've ever been in that moment, standing in a room, full of eyes waiting to see what you'll do when someone crosses a line, remember this: your power isn't in your reply. It's in your restraint. It's in knowing that dignity is not something you fight for. It's something you protect. And sometimes the strongest answer is none at all. So when the fire comes, when the insults are thrown, when the crowd leans in, expecting a show, give them something unexpected. Give them your calm. Give them your stillness. Give them nothing to grab onto, and watch how quickly they burn out without your reaction to keep them lit. Because the one who walks through fire without flinching is always the one remembered. Some people don't argue to reach truth, they argue to be seen. And when they cry, twist the facts, and cast themselves as the wounded soul, it's not for resolution, it's for applause. The most dangerous manipulation doesn't come from cruelty. It comes from performative vulnerability, the kind that weaponizes pain to control the narrative. Claire had seen it before, but never like this. As an event manager in Los Angeles, she was used to handling stress, navigating egos, and keeping timelines tight. She'd built a reputation for being composed and fair. But when Jenna joined the team, something shifted. At first, Jenna seemed helpful, even eager. She played the role of the overworked underdog, the one who just needed a little more time, a little more support, and Claire gave her that. She gave her grace until patterns began to surface. Deadlines missed, details conveniently forgotten. And whenever Claire tried to address it privately, Jenna would respond with tears. "I'm doing my best," she'd whisper. "I just feel like nothing I do is good enough." To the outside world, it looked like Claire was pressuring her, being harsh. But Claire wasn't harsh. She was clear. And clarity, to someone living in confusion, feels like aggression. The worst moment came during a department meeting. Claire presented the overview of a project that had nearly fallen apart due to late-stage missteps. Without naming names, she addressed accountability. But Jenna, seated just a few chairs down, began to cry. Again, not sobbing, but just enough to steal the attention. And within seconds, the conversation wasn't about solutions anymore. It was about Jenna. Claire was cast as the villain in a play she didn't audition for. The scene was scripted, the misunderstood hero, the emotional moment, the collective sympathy. She had two choices: defend herself and look cruel, or stay silent and look complicit. That's when Claire realized she'd been pulled into a drama loop, a cycle where emotion outplayed reason and truth was whatever earned the most pity. The more she tried to explain, the more she fed the script. So this time, she chose something different. She didn't clarify. She didn't push back. She observed over the weeks that followed. Claire stepped out of the narrative. She spoke less, documented more, and refused to respond emotionally. When Jenna skipped another task, Claire addressed it factually, without tone, without accusation. When others tried to pull her into gossip, Claire excused herself. She gave no energy to the performance, and what happened next was slow, but sure. The room began to change. Colleagues who once defended Jenna started noticing the patterns, the inconsistencies, the predictable tears at every moment of accountability. Without confrontation, without a single word of blame, the story began to unravel. Not because Claire forced it, but because the truth, when unprovoked, has a way of speaking for itself. That's the quiet power of Stoicism. Epictetus said, "To complain is always non-productive and never appropriate." Claire learned that the hard way. Defending yourself in the court of emotional manipulation is a losing game, because the rules aren't fair. The goal isn't truth, attention, and the only winning move is not to play. There's strength in compassion, yes, but there's greater strength in boundaries. Claire didn't become bitter. She didn't retaliate. She simply reclaimed her role in the story. She chose to stop reacting, to stop participating, and in doing so, she forced everyone else to take a second look at what was really happening. Not every victim is acting, but when someone uses their pain to silence others, it stops being healing, it becomes control. And the person who sees through it, the person who chooses quiet over chaos, doesn't need to explain their silence. They've already said enough just by stepping out of the frame. So if you find yourself in that loop, where facts are twisted, and your calm is used against you, ask yourself, is this conversation even real? Or is it just a performance waiting for your cue? You don't need to take the stage. Let the actor play alone. Let the silence stretch. Let the truth echo back when the show runs out of lines. Because eventually, even the most convincing mask slips. And when it does, the audience always remembers who stayed grounded. That's how you escape the drama. Loop not by shouting your truth, but by letting it stand unshaken, even when everyone else is acting. There is a quiet heartbreak that doesn't come from betrayal or insults. It comes from being overlooked. It's not loud. There's no explosion, just a slow fading of acknowledgement, a slow erosion of presence. And one day, you realize that your effort has become background noise to people who stopped noticing you were even trying. Nathan felt that silence. Long before he accepted it, he was always the first to reach out. The one who remembered birthdays without a Facebook reminder. The one who checked in when no one else thought to. He planned the gatherings, sent the just thinking about you texts, showed up without being asked, and for a while, it felt right, like this was his role, his gift to the people he loved. But over time, something shifted. When life got heavy for him, the phone didn't ring. When he stopped texting first, the days stretched into weeks. No calls, no how have you been, not even a miss you. At first he told himself they were just busy. Everyone's tired, everyone's overwhelmed. But the truth was harder to swallow. They weren't busy, they were comfortable. Comfortable with his effort, his availability, his presence. So comfortable, in fact, they didn't notice he was slipping away. There's a painful clarity that comes when you finally stop watering what never tried to grow. Nathan didn't make an announcement. He didn't write a long message demanding recognition. He simply stopped. No more reaching out. No more follow-ups. No more saving space in his calendar for people who wouldn't notice his absence. And what he discovered was this. Some people only notice your worth when they start feeling your silence. And some, they never notice at all. The people who cared truly, felt the shift. They reached out. They apologized. They stepped forward. But many others just disappeared. Not out of malice, but out of habit. They were used to Nathan being there, so they never imagined a version of life where he wasn't single quotes. This is what so many of us go through, but never name. That slow, aching realization that being available doesn't guarantee being valued. That the more you give without boundaries, the more you teach others that your love comes without conditions. And while there's beauty in showing up, there's danger in always being the first one to do so. Seneca once wrote, "Time discovers truth." And in Nathan's silence, time told the truth about who valued him for who he wasn't, who simply enjoyed the benefits of his presence. Absence is not revenge. It's not manipulation. It's reflection. When you step back, you give others the space to consider what they've taken for granted. And if they never move toward you in that space, that's your answer. That's the kind of clarity that no conversation, no confrontation, no heartfelt plea can give you. Nathan didn't become bitter. He became better at choosing where his energy went. He started placing his presence where it was invited, not expected, where it was appreciated, not assumed. And in doing so, he began to attract people who saw him not just what he did for them, but who he was when he walked into the room. So if you've been carrying the weight of one-sided effort, if your kindness has started to feel like a debt, people expect you to pay pause, not to punish, but to protect your peace. Step back, not out of spite, but out of respect for your own heart. Let the silence speak. Let the absence echo, because the ones who truly see you will hear it, and they'll come closer. The rest, let them fade. You never had them in the first place. Your value was never tied to how much you gave. It was always in who you are. And the right people will never need a reminder of that. They'll notice when you're quiet. They'll reach out without being prompted. They'll meet you halfway without you having to pave the entire road. Nathan's story isn't just his, it's yours. It's all of ours, at some point. And it reminds us of a simple truth that changes everything. You don't have to prove your worth by being constantly available. Sometimes, the boldest act of is stepping away quietly, letting the silence do what words never could. There's a certain silence that doesn't come from anger or sadness. It comes from healing, from growth, from knowing you're no longer the same person who once waited for someone to change. And when that silence settles, it doesn't scream for closure, it becomes the closure. Emily had poured herself into her relationship with Jared. She didn't just love him, she built around him. Every plan, every decision, every quiet act of kindness was a brick in the foundation she thought they were building together. She showed up, again and again. She asked about his day, remembered his worries, supported his ambitions, held space for his struggles. And for a while it felt like it mattered. But slowly, invisibly, The energy stopped being mutual. Jared grew distant. The check-ins became occasional. The gratitude faded. He stopped asking about her world while expecting her to orbit his. The more she gave, the more it felt expected, and the more it was expected, the less it was valued. Emily spoke up. She voiced her needs, gently at first, then clearly. She didn't ask for anything extravagant, just presence, consideration, reciprocity. And each time, Jared responded with the right words, but none of the change. Promises with short lifespans, apologies without transformation. So one day, she stopped speaking, not in bitterness, but in finality. She didn't leave with a dramatic fight. She didn't threaten, plead, or wait for another cycle. She just left quietly, calmly, and in that stillness, she reclaimed every piece of herself she had given away, trying to be understood. Months passed, and just as she began settling into her new rhythm, learning herself again, building a life not defined by emotional labor, the texts began. I miss you. I messed up. I didn't realize what I had. He said he had changed, that he finally understood, that he wanted to start over. But Emily, she had already started over. Not with someone else, but with herself. She read his messages with compassion, but no curiosity. Because when someone only realizes your worth in your absence, what they regret is not losing you, they regret losing access to the comfort you provided, the emotional cushion, the unconditional presence. And that realization is what Stoic strength teaches us to hold on to. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And Emily, in that moment, was free not because Jared had changed, but because she no longer needed his recognition to feel whole. Her silence wasn't a weapon, it was a mirror, and it showed Jared the truth he never had to confront before. She was no longer waiting. This is what most people don't understand about regret. It comes loud and desperate when it finally arrives. But healing is quiet. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It doesn't try to be heard. It simply lives. Emily didn't need to explain why she wasn't coming back. She didn't know Jared the comfort of closure when he had so long denied her the effort of consistency. Some doors aren't slammed shut, they're sealed by silence. And some hearts don't break, they outgrow. So if you've ever walked away from someone who only realized your value once you were gone, remember this. You are not unkind for not returning. You are not cold for not giving them a second chance. You are simply honoring the growth that they only saw when it was no longer theirs to benefit from. Regret is not proof of love. It's proof of miscalculation, of someone betting you would always be there, even when they stopped showing up. And your silence, it doesn't punish them, it frees you. Let them regret, let them remember, let them wrestle with the weight of their choices, but don't let them return out of convenience. Because the final silence, the one you choose when you've already rebuilt yourself, isn't empty. It's full of everything they never saw, and it's yours to keep. Every story told in this journey, from Ethan's quiet defiance to Emily's final silence, traces a path we all recognize: being misunderstood, being betrayed, being overlooked, provoked, manipulated, or taken for granted. These are not rare moments. They're universal scars that mark every heart trying to live with integrity in a world that often rewards noise more than wisdom. Ethan didn't need to scream to clear his name. He let the facts and time speak, and in doing so, preserved not just his reputation, but his peace. Madison, blindsided by the friend she trusted most, chose to walk away without a single word, reclaiming her dignity and refusing to be a character in someone else's drama. Lucas taught us that when others throw verbal punches, your silence is not weakness, it's armor. Claire exposed the cost of staying calm in a performance built for pity, reminding us that truth doesn't beg for attention, it reveals itself when the audience stops applauding. Nathan, the quiet giver, stepped back and allowed his absence to measure the depth of others' care. And Emily, finally, reminded us that growth isn't measured by what you return to, but by what you outgrow. All these stories may belong to different people, but they echo one voice. Silence, when used wisely, is not the lack of power. It is power. The kind that doesn't shout to be heard, but instead demands attention by its very presence. The kind that doesn't need applause because it knows its own worth. In our current world, where everyone has something to prove, something to post, something to explain, silence has become almost radical. But that's what makes it sacred. That's what makes it stoic. The lesson here is not to be passive. Stoicism is not about rolling over and accepting disrespect. It's about choosing your battles, knowing that not every fire needs your fuel. It's about protecting your energy, your mental clarity, your emotional economy. It's about being so grounded in your values that someone else's chaos doesn't get to pull you out of alignment. How do you apply this? Start here. When someone lies about you, don't rush to clear your name. Let your consistency do the talking. Truth takes longer, but it lasts longer too. When someone betrays you, walk, don't chase. Don't beg for closure from someone who shattered the connection. Your peace is worth more than their apology. When someone insults you, pause, observe. Know that anyone trying to pull you down is already beneath where you stand. Your silence is not submission, it's elevation. When someone plays the victim, to manipulate others, refuse to engage. Don't step into their play. Step out of the theater. When you feel taken for granted, pull back, not to punish, but to protect. Your absence is often the only language some people truly understand. And when they come back, when the regret finally catches up, don't confuse their realization with your responsibility. Growth means you don't return to what hurt you just because it remembers your name. You deserve relationships where you are heard without raising your voice, where your presence is noticed without needing to prove it, where your silence is understood, not feared, not tested. The truth is, you don't need to fight every battle. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone who misunderstands you. You don't need to react to prove you're right. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand still, breathe deep, and say nothing at all. Let time do its quiet work. Let karma finish the sentence you chose not to write. Let your calm confuse those who thrive on chaos, because the ones who matter will feel your silence and adjust. The rest were only ever spectators, not participants. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these stories did you connect with the most? Have you ever chosen silence and found strength in a tour wished you had? How do you handle betrayal, provocation, or being taken for granted? Drop your answer in the comments, or even share your own story. Your perspective might help someone who needs that reminder today. And if this message resonated with you, if you found truth in these words, hit that subscribe button. Support this channel so we can keep creating meaningful content that empowers, inspires, and helps you navigate life with more clarity and strength. Because sometimes the loudest message is the one you never say out loud. Let silence speak, let it lead, and let it set you free.